Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming back at you. It is coming live from Film Fanatic headquarters. It is 10:37 on a Wednesday morning. Beautiful day. We've had some super nice, amazing weather ever since Memorial Day weekend. We've had some killer weather. So, yeah, today's show is going to be a special show that I've been wanting to get to. And I'm going to be talking about this new band that I've been playing with, Osmia. They're a local band here based in Belfast. I wanted to do. I get sidetracked pretty easily, and I'm kind of inundated with, like just this morning, I got a couple of movies, an original version of the film, and then also a remake that came out shortly thereafter. And I was like, it hit me this morning. I was like, oh wait, these are two amazing movies, especially the first one. I haven't seen the remake. I've only seen it actually once, and I need to, and I like the remake quite a bit. But so I'm always like thinking of new ideas and new things to bring about. With variety with this channel, and I always talk about mainly, obviously, movies. But the main thing really is to kind of bring some films to the table that maybe some folks out there have never checked out, and to shine a light on that. That's, I guess, if anything, that's like, if I have a mission statement, that's what it would be. But I also do lots of music shows, and I really talk about how all of these, music. I've been doing a lot more music shows as of late, as well as film shows, and I'm always trying to bring. I don't want to always do. I'm trying to, always bring variety. So I'm always thinking of ideas, and today's show is going to be on a band that I've been really, really fortunate enough to start playing with, and that is Osmia. And that's a show I've been wanting to do for a while, but I just kind of got inundated with some other things that I wanted to do and blah blah blah. But today's show is going to be about the band Osmia, and it's a trio with Leo and Eric. Leo is pretty much the main kind of nucleus of the band, but I also feel like the two guys, him and Eric, have a huge, like, I don't know, they're kind of connected at the hip. So they're equally, creative and contributing. But I'd say Leo is probably the central guy, the central brain of the band. He does the booking for the shows. He does, all of, kind of band related things. And I really, really love this band. And it was really a series of real interesting, unexpected events that led to me kind of being a member of the band to where it's evolved to where it is now. And so there's a lot to talk about, but I've been wanting to do this show for a while. So I'm going to be talking about pretty much my favorite new project that I'm playing with, and that is Osmia. And it's interesting because I never had the experience of really, say, really loving a band, following a band, becoming and being a genuine fan of the band, but then having the chance to actually play in the band. I haven't really had that experience before. And that's what this was, so it's very different for me. In past, it's like somebody will ask me if I'm interested in, maybe filling in for someone. If their drummer can't make it, they'll ask me to be a part of that or fill in for some gigs. Or I might have a couple of friends or a friend or two that is interested in doing a project together. That happens. And and then usually a band will form out of that sometimes, and those kinds of things. But this whole situation was very, very different. So it started about 3 or 4 years ago. It started around, I think, well, we're 2025 now. It started in like 2021, I believe. Might have even been the start of COVID. It's hard to believe COVID's like 5 years. We're 5 years into it, but it might have been around that. It might have actually been before that too. Now that I think of it, so I I had played. I was in a band, Electric Bonfire at the time. That band is really not. Well, it's pretty much. I don't know. Unfortunately, kind of broken up, but played with this band, Electric Bonfire, which was a rock band that was based here in Midcoast. We were based out of Lincolnville. Really, really fun band. That band has been on a weird break, and we kind of don't have anything going on, and we haven't played. But anyway, we the first time I came across Osmia pretty much was like I was at that time about 5 years ago or so. We had a lot of summers where Electric Bonfire was very busy, mostly seasonal, and we did an album. But during the summer, we played at this festival, and I think it was like 2021 or 2020. It was a few years ago now. But we played at this music festival. We were on this bill, and there was going to be, I know it was an all day festival, and it was in Swanville. And so I got there, I wasn't sure what time we were starting. I think, I knew that we were going to be playing, in the evening, and the music was going to be at this festival was all day into the night. There was a shit ton of bands. There was a bunch of bands playing. It was at this old farmhouse. There was a bunch of bands playing inside at this giant farmhouse, and then there was also going to be a bunch of music and bands playing on the lawn. And typically, when I get involved with something like that, I usually like to kind of go early and check out the whole kind of event. As a fan of going to see live music, I love to kind of just basically soak it all in. I really love that. And so that's like, in my free time, that's what I do. And I'm going to go see a band this Saturday that I haven't seen in a long time, and I'm really excited to see them. So that's something I do anyway in my free time. But anyway, so I decided, I knew we were going to be playing like, probably in the evening, like I think 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night. And I knew we were going to be playing late, but I decided to get there early to kind of just check out the music. And I knew a little bit about this festival. There was going to be a lot of, eclectic music there, and then also a lot of, kind of experimental stuff. I've been doing a lot of shows lately on a lot of kind of experimental music, bands I've been really digging a lot of noise stuff. And I knew that this festival was going to have a lot of those kinds of bands, so I was extra interested in checking it out because it's a a genre or genres that I really love, but you don't get a chance to really see all that much. You're not going to see it in your typical venues around here. Usually it's at a house party, but there are venues that do have shows like that, but it's a little bit harder to see. So I jumped at the chance of going anyway. I would have probably have gone to this festival anyway. So I went early and saw some amazing music at this festival. It was a beautiful summer day, and there was a couple of artists that played that were kind of more in the harsh noise kind of thing. There was some folk music. There was, kind of a couple of bands that were very psychedelic, kind of a jam band, if you will. But all the stuff was pretty eclectic, and it was really cool. I loved some of the noise stuff I saw. But there was one band that played there, and that was Osmia. Osmia played midday in the afternoon, and I believe it was the first time I saw them. And they were great. They were phenomenal. I had never really met them before. It was the first time seeing them, and it's interesting to describe their style. Like their stuff really reminds me a lot of like early Sonic Youth, a little bit of the Pixies. They also have a very kind of shoegazy sound, like bands like Explosions in the Sky is a really great example, I think, of that kind of style. Deaf Heaven is a band that is probably my favorite rock band right now. They fuse that style, shoegaze, with black metal. Godspeed You Black Emperor, and there's also, they also have a very experimental kind of edge, and there's a lot of dissidence, there's a lot of distortion. I'm a huge fan of, guitar players that use lots of effects and pedals, and and also have a very electronic sound. So I saw them play at this festival, and they played during the day, and I was like blown away by them, and I was just like, wow, this is really cool. And I believe they were playing as a four piece at the time, and I didn't know them, and I totally loved their sound, like totally dug them. And then I think it was a couple of years later, I saw them play at another show, and just really fell in love with their sound. I really, when it comes to rock music, I mean, I'm a big metalhead guy too, but when it comes to like more indie rock stuff, I really love that, kind of edgy rock sound with a lot of dissonance and distortion. And I love that ethereal sound, that you get or that you hear a lot in kind of the more instrumental shoegazy sound of that genre or sounds. And I was just like, wow, these guys are kick ass, like really really good. And I saw them play somewhere else. I can't remember exactly where it was, but I saw them play somewhere else in Belfast at the time. And they are, well, at that time, and they still are based in Belfast, Maine, which is a really close town to here. Actually, it's like 7 minutes away. So yeah, by the second time that I saw Osmia, I totally fell in love with their sound. I thought they were just killer, and I just totally dig the vibes. And I loved it because it was like, I don't know, I love music that has a real rawness to it, and there's an edge to it. And the one guy in the band that I knew, Jason Hay, I've known him actually for a long time. He played drums in that band at the time. He used to own a really cool like occult shop in Belfast, Elder and Vine, and I knew him through that shop. I used to go in there all the time, and at one point we were working on. He used to throw these parties. He has a farm. He used to have these barn parties at his house, and at one time we were almost going to do a quantum show with a few other bands at his barn, but it kind of never really worked out. But during our conversations, he would bring up, yeah, I'm playing with this band Osmia, and this was way before I heard them, and he would always talk about them. And at the time, he was saying on how like they were playing lots of gigs. They were playing in Portland a lot. They were really active and doing a lot of a lot of cool things. So I was always curious what they sound like, and then I finally saw them, and I was like, wow, like this is totally my cup of tea. I love this shit. So I saw them a second time, and by that time I was like a huge fan. I was like, these guys were awesome, and then I think I saw them uh, probably one other time after that, by this point I was a fan, I'm like a genuine fanboy of Osmia. So, and then last winter I was playing with this band called Phil Hummer and the White Falcons, which is a local band that kind of does a like a rockabilly punk sound or style. And I had played a few like gigs with them, pretty sporadically. And they had asked me about doing more gigs at one point, and I wasn't able to kind of do them because I was a little bit busy with these other projects. But we kept in touch, and then last winter there was this opportunity for them to play to host these kinds of music events at Hey Sailor in Searsport, which is an amazing space. It's the best. It's the best local venue here in Maine. It's a just an amazing spot. I've been really fortunate and very lucky to play lots of gigs there, especially with my band Quantum. We had our CD release show. So I have a real deep kind of tie in with those guys and connection, and it's been really awesome. And so I and these gigs that Phil and the White Falcons were doing, their kind of idea was they were going to do these Sunday shows but have a bunch of other bands play as well. And then at the end of the night, the White Falcons would play. So, and it was last winter, and things are usually a lot slower during the winter, so I agreed to do it. And I was like, yeah, because I love playing with those guys. They were a lot of fun. They play like a real kind of 50s style, 60s style, kind of rockabilly, a little bit of surf, and it's definitely got like this punk edge. And it's Phil and his wife Ray, who plays upright bass, and it's just a trio, but they're a lot of fun, and they're a great like kind of party band. So I agreed to do it, and we did it. We did the series ran, or the residency, if you want to call it that, ran for about a good solid 2 months, where it was cool. It was every Sunday, and so it was good to have that extra work during the winter months, and it was fun. Like they had different. They would have usually two other bands playing during over the course of those residencies. It would be on a Sunday night. So I think it was maybe a month or so after we were doing these shows at Hey Sailor. Osmia was one of the bands also. So I was like, oh, that's at that time I'd seen them play about 2 or 3 times, and I was a huge fan of their sound because way back in the day I was in a band for a long time called Full Contact Kitty, which was a band that I had for about, I don't know, 6 years or so, 7 years, and that was this real kind of punk rock inspired. We were really inspired by like Sonic Youth, a lot of Dissonance, and we were it was a fun band, and it had this kind of edgy kind of vibe to it. And you know I really, since I played, since my time with playing with Full Contact Kitty, which was, at this point 1,000 years ago, I haven't really played in any bands that really even come close to that kind of thing. Most of the bands I play with, I like them and they're fun, but they're more on the mellow side, So, but I haven't played in a full like rock band in years, and I felt like there were similarities between like what Osmia was doing and all the things that I love about kind of edgy, kind of dark rock, with what we were doing with Full Contact Kitty and Osmia. So because I love that sound, and it's kind of that kind of thing is in my DNA. So when I found out that they were on the bill, I was super excited. So I was like, yeah, that's awesome. And so we did this one show, and Osmia played, and they just blew the roof off the place. And at this point, they went through I remember they went through a slightly different lineup change. Okay, when I first saw them, they were a four-piece. They had Leo on guitars and vocals, and then Eric on bass and guitar, and then they had a guitar, another bass player, and then they had Jason playing drums. So, and then I think I saw them the third time I saw them. They were a trio, and I'm a sucker for power trios. I love power trios. Like, I don't know, I love bands that are big, and even bands that have horn sections and all these things, and like maybe percussion and drums and two singers. Like, I love all that stuff too. But there's something for me about seeing a power trio work, because I feel like if it's locked in, it's like a Sherman tank. Like everybody's got their designated roles, and I feel like there can be a lot of space in the music and a lot of room for play. So when I saw them at Hey Sailor, that was the best I had ever heard them, and I was really blown away by. They were, and again, the thing is like they're a loud rock and roll band with all those cool elements, but they're so into pedals and experimentation that I don't know. It wasn't like ever loud in a negative sense, if that makes any sense, in a bad way. As opposed to like hearing a band that's just got either a really loud drummer or a guitar player that's just way too loud, and it's just loud, and it's painful. They're not really, I don't know, they're not really saying anything. They're just screaming at the top of their lungs. It's not really about dialing in the sound. With Osmia, they had that sound so dialed in that it was never abrasive that way, which is really interesting because their music is so uh, rich and dynamic and explosive, but it's not too loud. It's interesting. So I saw them play. They played this at the same bill, and they played, I think, right before we played at, because we would always close the night. We would always be like the last band. I was totally blown away by them, and they were awesome. And I remember that night I got a chance to kind of talk to them a little bit more. Like again, I knew Jason Hay really really well, and I spent most of the time talking to him. I talked a little bit to Leo, but then that was really it. And then it was like probably, I don't know, months later. I went to a show at Hey Sailor, and I ran into Leo at Hey Sailor. I went to some rock show at I I mean, I've been really fortunate to play a lot of gigs at Hey Sailor, but I also go there a lot to see music. And I remember it was like quite a few months after that or something, I had gone there to see a couple of bands, and Leo was there from Osmia, and we ended up like talking more, and he seemed like a really cool guy, and told me a little bit about what they're doing, and realizing how long they've actually been a band and their history, and that they're all like they're basically a California band that kind of relocated to Maine, and they're all like Cali guys, and they've been playing in bands, and Osmi itself has been together for many years. And I was like, wow, like that's really cool, like making this big transition to moving here, and it's a whole different kind of change. So we got to know each other pretty well, and then I think at that time, around that time, we had a Quantum show at Hey Sailor, and I think I had invited Leo to that, and he came to that, which was awesome. And then we talked more and more, and then we ended up doing this past November. Um, we had a CD release show, and he came to that. We got to know each other more and more. But the one time that we really got to hang out with was over the summer. There was a big music festival in Rockland, and it was an all day music festival. I went to it just to go to check it out, and it was at Lincoln Street Center, and it was really cool. And Leo was there, and I was there for probably 5 hours. There was a ton of music. There was vendors. There was a food truck. It was a really cool day, and Leo was there, and we ended up hanging out basically like 4 or 5 hours just shooting shit, and it was super great. And I was like, this guy is totally awesome. And at the end of the night, towards the end of the day or the night of being there, I was like, we were talking about, we realized we had a lot of the same interests, a lot of the, we were into, a lot of the same bands, and all these things. And we talked about like, just for the hell of it, getting together and jam sometime. And we are like, yeah, great. So I remember we ended up exchanging contact information, and then fast forward, like we had, like I said, our, my band Quantum had our album release party, and he came to that, and that was in November. And I think it was like a couple weeks after that we talked about, just him coming over here to my house and just jamming, just basically jamming, and having some beers. And so he came over to my house, and and it was the two of us, and we had some drinks, and just kind of jammed, and had a blast. He brought his pedal board, and I really dug the stuff he was playing, and we just and it was great. And then he was here for a few hours, and at the very kind of tail end of him hanging out here, he had said like, they basically lost their drummer, and that Jason Hay, the drummer who he's been with them for quite a few years, just decided to kind of quit the band. And basically it was all these things, and I was like, oh wow, like And as a fan of the band, I was like, oh, that sucks, like, because I really love their sound, and I'm like, wow, concerned for it, like, what are they going to do next? And he said that part of the thing that happened was what Leo was trying to do with the band was he wanted to basically go out on tour, go on the road, and do, more gigs out of state, and but particularly he wanted to, work on booking this tour. And when all of these things came up, he said that their drummer Jason Hay had basically said he was kind of done and wasn't really interested in like traveling and doing all these things, and especially not interested in doing a tour. So I was like, wow, that's crazy. And then at the very end, while all this was happening, he kind of hinted or brought up the idea of would I maybe be interested in playing a couple of shows with them. And I was like, yeah, definitely, I'd love to. I don't want to like, this just happened with their drummer leaving, and I know it's like kind of a sensitive area, sensitive place. I don't want to like impede on anybody. I don't want to step on anybody's toes. I don't want to make anybody upset. Those kinds of things. So I was like, yeah, I'd be into definitely playing with you guys because I love the sound you guys have. So that's kind of where we left it. And then I don't know, a few months, or not, I should say a few weeks, a couple weeks later, Leo came over again, and we jammed and we talked a little bit more. And then suddenly he was asking me if I would want to like possibly do this tour with him. And the tour was probably about 3 or 4 months out. So planning wise, if it was going to be a thing, I had we had enough time to do that. But he had more or less formally asked me if I would want to do this tour and play these other shows and these kinds of things. And I was like, yeah, I totally, some time had gone by, and I was just like, yeah, like that would be awesome because I'm generally I love the sound that you guys do, and I was like, yeah, like this would be fun, and it's all original music, so I said, yeah, I'll definitely do it, count me in. It was, at a pretty good time. I didn't have a whole lot of other things going on, and it was like in the middle of winter and blah blah blah, and so and Leo had said that they were, considering doing this tour because at that point they had some of the dates secured for the tour, and they were considering doing it without a drummer. They were going to maybe do it as like a duo or use a drum machine and or just do it solo, or if I would want to do it, they were, him and Eric were discussing about the ways they could do it. But nothing was like at that point confirmed or or secured. So, but we were just talking about it, and they had dates that were booked, and I was looking at my calendar and said, "Oh, well, I could probably do this, I can do that," and but things were still like not set in stone or solidified. So then a week or a few other weeks went by, and he asked me if I wanted to do like a regular formal band practice with him and Eric. I have a practice space here at my house in Northport, but they also have, and they've had it for a long time, but they have a big, well, not a big practice space, but they have a practice space in Morrill that they rent out. And Leo wanted to know if I wanted to come over there and meet Eric. I hadn't really ever talked to Eric before, and have like a regular rehearsal slash audition kind of thing. And Eric hadn't met me before, hadn't heard me play, so I was like, yeah, that'd be awesome. So I went over there, and we basically jammed a little bit, and then played like a handful of their tunes. We kind of picked at some of that stuff previously when it was just Leo and I, and I don't know, like I just felt this like, I don't know, like it hasn't happened to me in a really long time, but I just felt like this like spark, and I was like, this could be a really special situation. I thought the guys were really cool. The music was amazing. It was interesting. It was challenging. and it was heavy. It was a lot of there was a lot of passion. I don't know. I just felt like this is this could be a really amazing situation. So after the rehearsal, everybody was in a good mood, and then and then 2 or 3 days later, Leo sent me a text saying that Eric enjoyed having me over there, and he liked how we all sounded together. And at that point, they said, "Okay, well, do you want to be a member of Osmia?" So I was just like, "Yeah, fuck yeah, I'll do it, totally do it." So at that point, they had the dates for the tour that they were booking all secured, and and then for the next couple of weeks, we went over all the dates, and I was able to do all of the dates, and then all the logistics with going on the road, places to stay, and you know where the shows were going to be, and out of state. They were all mostly out of state, and it was going to entail traveling and all these things. So, and requiring me to get the time off from work. So we worked on all the logistics, and I was super excited. And I didn't. Again, it happened really quickly. I knew Leo from like basically running into him, and we had jammed a few times. And it was a series of events. The drummer had just decided to quit, so I was just like, yeah, let's just. And I just said yes to the whole situation, not really thinking about it per se. I wasn't like, well, this or well that. I was just like, yep, I love what these guys were doing. This is this music that they're writing and creating the energy is just absolutely fantastic. So I just, without hesitation and not without thinking about it, I fully committed to the band. I was just like, yep, without a doubt. So it was awesome, and it felt like I don't know, like there was electricity in the air, and I was super excited. And their music, musically was challenging. Some of the stuff was like kind of unconventional and really unique, and so it was like, I knew for me to get on par before the tour was going to be a lot of work, and the music was super high level energy, and Leo had said to me before this all happened, he was not sure if I was going to be the right fit for the band because he liked my playing, and he had seen me play, in a few bands, but he felt like I was kind of this quiet little drummer. I think that those were his exact words. He didn't think I could bring that kind of energy to the music. And I told him it was funny because when we started, and then we started rehearsing every week leading up to the tour. We started rehearsing a lot, and we had a couple of months to get ready, 2 or 3 months. But we started rehearsing a lot, like twice a week, and it was great. And so, but there was this ongoing joke where their music, like the first couple of times I had a full rehearsal with them, I was physically wiped out. I was exhausted, and it became this joke because I was so not used to playing this kind of music where it requires a lot more stamina. It's more it's way more physical because I had said like a lot of the bands I was playing with and that I play with are kind of on the mellow side. And I had said there was this like this ongoing joke that I'm gonna before the tour I'm gonna have to start like heavy lifting. I'm gonna start having to lift weights, and it was pretty funny. One of the other things that was super exciting about doing this tour with Osmia too was that we were going to be opening up for this band called Ceremony, which is basically the rhythm section for this iconic, one of the greatest like indie rock noise bands of all time, A Place to Bury Strangers, and they're like a legendary band. And I've been a huge fan of their music for years. I had a friend turn me on to Place to Bury Strangers years ago, and I just was a huge fan of their music. So they the rhythm section for that band, they basically started this side band, which is a duo called Ceremony. It's somewhat similar to what Place to Bury Strangers does, but a little bit less kind of over the. It's not guitar driven, so but it has a similar aesthetic. But So it was like kind of an honor to be playing, to be involved with doing this tour with some musicians and more or less a band that I have, admired and have like so much respect for. So it was really exciting. We were going to be opening up for them for some of these dates. And so we had our first show at Hey Sailor, and I was, super nervous trying to work out the kinks. And then after that, we had shows in Washington D.C. We had some a couple of shows in Pennsylvania and Boston, and also Portland and Rhode Island. And all of the shows were back to back, and the venues that we ended up playing at, that Leo had booked these shows at, were super awesome. I didn't know what to expect. I thought the shows or the venues would be more, kind of dingy house party gigs. I don't know why I pictured that, or like venues that were just total dive bars. Because, Osmia is like a punk band, at its core, which would have been fine. Would have been fine with me. But I was really blown away by some of these venues. Like they were really awesome. They were like actually really, all the venues had their shit together. They had really great sound systems. They had sound guys. They all had a beautiful kind of light system, beautiful stage setup. It was an honor, and it was awesome to be playing and opening up for ceremony, and we got to see so many cool bands during the whole time. And it was a lot of work because, well, for me, I was like so new and I still feel like I'm brand new into the fold. But for me, it was a lot of work because, again, some of the music is really challenging, and it's a very particular sound. It requires a lot of physicality, and so I had to like get myself, really integrated into that. And so it was a lot of preparation, and it was a lot to just do right away after not having any experience doing it before. It's it had been years, so but we just kind of we did it. And and it was, I have like some tour experience, since I've been trying to do this crazy thing of being a working musician. I have some touring experience. I I played in a country band many 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 years ago, and we did a bunch of gigs at one point and did a little bit of touring, and we played at some big giant festivals. And I was also in another rock band that started to do some tours, and then my band Quantum, at one point we were doing kind of little mini tours as well. And then also another band that I play in, we did a pretty big tour last summer. And last summer I toured with Bookhead Sweet Tooth, which is a band I play with quite a bit, I guess. And that's a super fun project. Totally different than Osmia in every way, shape, and form. But we did a big tour last year, and that was the first time in many, many years. Most of the time when I'm playing gigs or whatever, they're fairly local and whatnot. But last year we did a pretty big tour in July, and that was the first time I did a big tour in a long time, and that was great. That was fantastic. So after that, after having that experience, I was like, yeah, I'm down for doing more of those tours, and doing things like that and taking some more chances. And because touring can be really great and fantastic, you can network with other people. You can, you know, I treat it too, for me, as like, even though it's, when you're touring, and there's all kinds of scales of it. You could be doing it where it's like really low tech, low fi, where you're getting in your own car, driving to the venue, and then you have bands that have like the big buses and all those things, and you have techs, and, you don't have to set up your gear and all those things. That's the high echelon, and I'm kind of, the low grades area. But I, and it, and it's, but for me, I love traveling, and I treat it as like a vacation too. And I hadn't done any traveling for a while, and a lot of these cities and states that we went to, I had never been to before. And it's a the other part. It's when you do tours, it's a lot of work. You don't you're sleeping in a different place every night. It's a lot of traveling. It's it's a lot of work. It's and you a lot of times don't get to sleep very well. So that part of it, and then sometimes you don't make any. You might not make very much money. That's the negative things of it. But overall, my experience last summer was really great. Like it was worth it, and I was really excited about doing this tour. So we ended up doing it, and then we had our last show in Portland at the Odeon Theater, and it was really fun. And I just was like, I love this band to death. Like this is great. Like whatever they ask of me, I will try to do it, and I will try to bring it, whatever they're asking. Like fully committed, and I love the guys. I love the music. And we've played a few shows since then. We just did a show last weekend, out of state, and we got some, a few more shows coming up. And I just think, honestly, I think it's interesting being in a band that you're a fan of or that you've been a fan of for a long time, and then having a chance to more or less be a part of that, creatively. And that's a totally different experience for. I've never had that experience for me. I've never had that experience before, so it's really unique, and I cherish it. And I honestly, I think those guys. I think what Leo has created with the sound of Osmia, and I think what Eric has done. Like the two of them are like brothers, and they work so well off of each other. They like finish each other's sentences, creatively all the time. They're so on, like they're connected at the hip, and everything about what they do is like I don't know, has a certain passion to it. There's a lot of fire to it, and there's a level of I don't know, kind of a level of like reckless abandonment. Like they want the music tight and really together, but yet there's this real rawness to it and a real looseness to it at the same time. It's interesting. There's a cool, combination of those things. And they really like to take chances, and really throw some caution to the wind. And that's how it is with playing with them, where we do rehearse and we have like a set list of what we're gonna do, like for that particular show, and a pretty good roadmap as to what is gonna happen. And that's for me because I'm still learning the material. I still feel like I'm still learning this stuff, and I'm still kind of figuring things out. But with their shows that they do that we've done, and how what actually ends up happening is they like keep me on my toes. Like they'll suddenly change the set. They'll throw in a new song that we've only played a couple times, and they'll like be really spontaneous, and you kind of don't know what's going to happen, even though it's like for the most part worked out. There's this spontaneity that happens. Like we had one show about a month ago where we had just started writing a tune, and it was barely finished. We got through it, and it was really cool, and it was I don't know, had these real interesting things about it, and I really was liking it, but it wasn't like really finished. We had just really started working on it, and we had a gig coming up, and all of a sudden that was the first tune we ended up playing. Which sometimes that can be a disaster because you're just not ready. But these guys like kind of thrive in that kind of energy, and for me it's like challenging, like, and it's I got to be like really focused and really like alert and in the moment, and it asks a lot, but that's what I want to do because it's about kind of growing and moving forward and challenging yourself. Like that's why you hopefully those are the reasons you hopefully get out of bed in the morning, and that's what they're all about. And I realized after doing this now for a little bit, where I'm like, and the thing too with the music and the creative things that they bring, like every time we rehearse or get together, they're always bringing something new and different and unconventional, and and it's not predictable. And I'm like, wow, where is all this stuff coming from? Like I would have never thought in 1,000 years to add this section to this tune. Like just really creative spontaneity going on all the time, and it's beautiful. And I truthfully think that like what those guys have created with their sound, I think Leo and Eric are geniuses. I'll say it. I think they are. I think they're creative geniuses, and I feel um, a big sense of humility, and I also feel really humbled to be part of that, because I feel like, you know, it's a rare thing to find that. It really is, because I feel like there's something going on with what those guys are doing that is just incredible. And all I can do is go for the ride and try to do the best that I can do, and not fuck it up. So it's a wonderful, wonderful experience. So I just wanted to share my thoughts on this incredible band, and not because I'm like in the band. It's really because I'm, like I said, how this whole thing started as being just a genuine fan, a big fan of this band. So it's been a wonderful, and also just an incredible experience to be playing with Osmia. So stay tuned for our next show. We have another show coming up in a few weeks. So at Hey Sailor. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.